Welcome back, viewers. You're tuned into Rise and Shine on Tobago Channel 5. I'm your host, Joseph Frederick, sitting in for Brother B. Looking on at the news yesterday, what I saw was the Minister of Education, Dr. Dolsby, I think that's the name, yes, hitting the ground running as she ensured that our C students were adequately prepared, that systems were in place for our C students to participate in the C exams. Looking at our news here on Tobago Channel 5, we recognize that the responses from the students was relatively great. So one can say that this administration, this cabinet of Dr. Royalty 2020-2025, that they have hit the ground running. I don't know if we can say that. With me on set, we have Mr. Martin George, the president of the Tobago Business Chamber. Mr. George, good morning and welcome to Rise and Shine.
Yes, hi, good morning to you and good morning Tobago and good morning to all your listeners throughout the diaspora in England, Canada, Switzerland, Sweden, Germany. They listen to you all over.
All right, that's good to know. Mr. George, tell us, what are your thoughts on the cabinet appointments, the selection of ministers by Dr. Rowley? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, the thing is, I guess given what he had to work with, he sought to do the best in the circumstances. There are some persons who felt that some changes could have been made, particularly, I know some may have wanted to see a new face in finance, and a few other areas. But I guess given the limited time and maybe limited resources, he tried to do the best that he could. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily just a question of the persons who you put, but it's how they perform when they are called upon to serve. So therefore, I think that's the main thing. Once he gets that idea across to his ministers that, look, you are here to work, you are here to serve, and you are here to get the job done. And once there is that greater level of transparency and accountability, in that we've always spoken of wanting to hold our ministers to a higher standard, but we hardly ever do it. So if that is implemented, then I think that there's a possibility that they could achieve, quite a bit.
As the Tobago Business Chamber, what is the feeling that you're getting from your members? The expectation of Tobago that this kind of cabinet, how this cabinet has been constituted, its impact to Tobago and the Tobago people?
Well, it's, I would say, cautiously optimistic. In other words, it's like you've been burned so many times before with your hopes and dreams and aspirations and with the promises and the blandishments which are offered on the political platform, that you're a bit gun shy when it comes to actually believing that things are going to change or improve. Now, the fact is, we have called upon the Prime Minister, and I don't know if he is considering it, but we have called upon him to actually appoint a minister for Tobago enterprise development, because we think that that's an important and critical role where we should have a minister stationed in Tobago specifically for the role and purpose of enterprise development in Tobago.
Minister for Tobago Enterprise Development. One hot button is here in the Tobago space is that of Tobago's autonomy. Dr. Rowley has indicated in his victory speech that this is going to be his last term. Do you see any progress do you foresee any progress being made on that issue of Tobago's autonomy given the composition of Parliament 2219?
Well, I see as much progress being made as has been made over the last 40 years that they've been talking about it. So I think that says it all.
Mr. George, we want to switch gears a bit, and we want to look at, there has been a lot of talk in the Tobago space within recent times about litigation. What is the format that one should follow if one is seeking to sue someone?
Well, usually, the first thing would be that you would consult with your attorney, and the second thing is that you would be honest and forthright with your attorney, regardless of how bad the facts are, or how bad the situation is, or how egregious your sin or error may have been. You ought to, make a clean breast of it to your attorney and, tell your attorney everything. And then the attorney ought then to give you the best possible advice in the circumstances. Sometimes it may not be what the client wants to hear, but our duty as impartial advocates and advisors is to tell you what is the best advice in law. That's our role and function. Then, of course, the last part of that puzzle is for the client to be willing to take that advice. Because sometimes clients, they hear the advice from the attorney and they still go off and do their own things. So, it's not something that you can force. I always say you can't force feed knowledge.
You can't force feed knowledge. Mr. George, you have heard, I've heard it as well, persons saying that we don't really sue people in Trinidad and Tobago. How true is that?
No. Actually, we are the most litigious society in the Caribbean. The most litigious society in the Caribbean. And I can tell you, when you compare to others in the English-speaking Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, all those other islands, they are not even close to Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to not only the volume and quantity of our litigation, but the quality. We have the highest standard and highest quality of litigation in the Caribbean, bar none. And I say this without hesitation. That's why you see when any of the other islands have big matters, they always come to Trinidad to get a senior counsel or a senior legal counsel to represent them. So we push the boundaries of the jurisprudence. We push the envelope. We always testing, probing the system. We are always at the cutting edge of legal developments throughout the Caribbean. So we are actually very litigious and we are very good at it, I might say, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago and the quality of good legal arguments that you have passing through the courts and through the judicial system.
Good quality of legal arguments. Mr. George, my neighbor and I, we fell out, we had an argument. My neighbor said something that I didn't like. Can I sue my neighbor because of that? Are there different kinds of litigation?
Well, of course, there are several different things. It depends on what your neighbor said. If what your neighbor said is true, then you may have very little basis for making a claim in defamation. And then, of course, if your neighbor only said it to you, you still have no case for defamation, even if it's not true. But if your neighbor is going around saying things that are untrue about you to other persons and it's injurious to your character, then, of course, you're talking about a scenario where you can go to your attorney and ask, in terms of advice for a matter for defamation. Right? So for defamation, it must be that what is said is untrue. Right? It must lower your estimation in the minds of right-thinking citizens so that they view you with odium and scorn based upon what this person said. And you must be able to prove that it was published to other persons or said to other persons.
Okay. Let's look at the courts. So I believe that I should sue my neighbor for cursing me. I decided to take the matter to the courts. Is there a rubric that the courts utilize to determine if they should proceed with a matter, or once you come with a matter, the matter has to be heard by a judge and those kind of things? Well, is there a system?
Well, the thing is, now you mixing a whole lot of scenarios there because, the question would be firstly whether it's criminal or civil.
Oh.
If you're talking a civil type of action where it is that you as a layperson, you're instituting a civil action against someone else, then once you file your action will get a hearing. Whether it's going to be struck out early, whether it's going to be thrown out on some preliminary argument or whatever, it doesn't matter. You will get a hearing. Right? If you're talking about a criminal matter where the police have filed it, first and foremost, they are the ones along with the state, who are in charge of the prosecution, because the police, their powers have been delegated from the DPP's department, whereby they can prosecute matters. But all prosecutions are done on behalf of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So they are the ones who have control over the matter in that regard. And you may see that you have made a complaint, the police have charged somebody, and you may find that the matter gets dismissed through no fault of your own, because maybe the police witnesses didn't come, or the other persons who they subpoenaed as witnesses didn't come, and the matter gets thrown out. So that's something that you necessarily don't have control over. But in the civil arena, you and your attorney would drive your own process until the court tells you otherwise, if the matter is determined.
Okay. Mr. George, let's switch gears a bit again. Let's go back to the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
As the president of the business chamber, we are expecting a budget shortly. What are your expectations of this budget?
Well, I would want to limit my responses to a Tobago perspective. So from the Tobago perspective, we would want to see the government, first and foremost, take the step that we've been calling upon them for years now, and indicate the immediate and unconditional repeal of the Foreign Investment Act and the land licensing regime, because that has crippled and stymied any and all investment from a foreign perspective into Tobago. Right? It's something that has served zero useful purpose. I had a meeting several years ago with a former chief secretary, and I told him exactly this would happen. I said, when you say you're stopping foreigners from buying, I said, all you are doing is opening the door for rich Trinidadians to come and buy up the same lands. So if you thought the purpose was to stop Tobagonians selling the lands, you are going to achieve nothing in that regard. And that's exactly what has happened. So the point is, it's the most absurd and useless an idiotic piece of legislation, and the government needs to admit its failure in that regard and be man enough to say this has not worked, it's a failure, it's a non-starter, get rid of it, repeal it immediately, the Foreign Investment Act. The next thing we'd want to see is that there be some mandatory legislative provisions with regard to a certain minimum percentage of local contractor and labor input in major projects in Tobago. And we are proposing 25%. There are some others who are saying it should be 10%, but whatever figure we agree upon, we want to ensure that when you have major projects being done in Tobago, that Tobagonians are given a certain minimum guaranteed involvement. Now, when I say involvement, I don't mean it that Tobagonians come there and they sit and twiddle their thumbs and do nothing and get paid. No, I'm talking about you get the contractor, the Tobago-based contractor in, he has a 10% stake in it, so he will put up his capital the same way, 10% he will have a stake in it, a share in it, but you will have that knowledge transfer, that learning experience, whereby the Tobago contractors will now be able to build out their skill set. We would also want to see the government ensure by legislation that these same major companies, because sometimes they bring in foreign companies, that they also commit to doing some level of overseas training for our local engineers, architects, draftsmen, so that they can go maybe on a 3-month course and, you know, be able to see the bridges in Amsterdam and how they built, how they designed, that kind of thing. That's the kind of way you build a nation. That's the way you build your skill set. And unless the government takes proactive measures in that regard, it's not going to happen at the pace or at the intensity that we would require.
Okay. Mr. George, I want to thank you on behalf of all of us here at Rise and Shine and our viewers for being a part of our program this morning. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much.
All right, viewers, at this time we are going to go for a break and we shall be right back.
Renting a vehicle? Come to Save a Lot. We have a wide variety of fuel-efficient cars and SUVs at the most affordable prices. Save a Lot has been providing Trinidad and Tobago with reliable rentals to meet a variety of transportation needs. From one-day rentals to short-term leasing, let Save a Lot get you behind the wheel of a vehicle